respond to Laura started off. What I really got out of this is we should be reading Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments,
Yes.
and that we should try to incorporate his ethical values in what I do as an economist. But what steps should we be taking other than reading people like Hume or Smith or John Stuart?
Well, that's very good. There's this terrific book by Adam Smith. And it's his first book. He only wrote 2 books. He would not have been a distinguished professor of anything in the modern world because he didn't write enough. Hardly wrote any articles, and none to speak of. And only 2 books, God. But his first book was 1759, called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it's terrific. Just like his later book, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776. It's humane, it's canny, he's a Scot, clever, funny, at least if you kind of fancy 18th century humor. And it's an education for economists. I didn't know about it till about 20 years ago. I mean, I knew about it, I guess. I can't remember if I even knew it existed. And then I started to teach it. I read it and taught it. And that's exactly right. A humanomics that brings everything together, the statistics, the economic analysis, the gender studies, the English department, all together. That's an economics that I can sign on to. And I honestly don't mean that we should throw away the statistics or the analysis and flee to the humanities. I think the sort of intellectual path that Chuck illustrates is the intertwining of the two. But you keep coming back to these economic questions and try to connect them with the novel and so on. So, what do I suggest? Buy and read my books. Especially buy.
Sort of a follow-up question on this. I heard it a little bit, for sure, in Laura's and Catherine's talks, and a little bit in Chuck's and maybe Bob's as well, and certainly in some of your responses.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if you see any evidence to suggest that we're moving in the right direction on doing this reading and doing this accounting. Especially now, and you made several references to the election. I'm kind of nervous about it. And so I'm wondering what you see in terms of, like Laura's question, what is this next source of motivation, of ethics, of cultural awareness going to be?
Well, I think all of us can respond to that one way or another. All I can do is keep preaching. And keep hoping that people will grow up, stop believing in magic, and will stop over-rigidifying their identification as scientists. By the way, the word science in English has a very peculiar history. It's only been defined the way we generally think of it in English for the last 150 years. In the 18th century, early 19th century, before, science was like it is in Italian, scienza. It means any systematic inquiry. It doesn't mean physical and biological sciences. So, but, it's really rough because economists, to speak of just my own field, one of my own fields, economists are extremely narrowly educated by people who have forgotten that they're humans. So I really worry about economics. In a liberal arts college, you've got the best chance for avoiding this nonsense. Because if you're going to have an intellectual life at all, you've got to talk to people in English and philosophy and chemistry, right? That's some thoughts. Any other thoughts on this issue? Is there hope for the future?
Cubs are up 4-1.
Yes. 5-1.
What's that?
5-1.
Thank you.
5-1.
Can you please stop? We had a DVR.
Oh, no.
I'd say, Charles, that I think we ask our students to do exactly that, and that we should look for more opportunities as colleagues to do more of that,
Yeah, I agree.
More of what?
that sharing.
So the
Moving-
students
yeah.
cross all the disciplinary boundaries. So
That's
you
right.
have to put out, you have to do all this code switching as you move across
That's
classes
true.
and understand the vocabularies. But the faculty are not asked to do the same thing.
Absolutely, that's
Right.
very true. We have had and still have it, or I'm not there, but we had, when I was at the University of Iowa for 19 years, a group called Poroi, the Project on Rhetoric of Inquiry. Very nicely in Greek, ancient Greek, it means ways and means.
Huh?
Yep. And at one point, this had about 100 faculty involved. And we would meet every week to discuss drafts of papers by our members. Not reading groups, I don't think that's entirely healthy. Not reading someone else and thinking, oh, that's wonderful. No. Drafts of our own papers. And the underlying principle was rhetoric. Because even if you're not a mathematician, you can read a mathematician's presidential address to the Midwest Mathematics Association, and you can see the rhetorical strategies in it. And you can highlight them and talk about them with the person in order that he or she be more effective in the argument they're making. See what I mean? So, rhetorical study, the kind of stuff that we do when we teach on composition, for example, is a central unifying discipline in the liberal arts, and was in Roman and Greek times and in the Middle Ages. So it's completely natural, historically speaking, that we did this. And this was a faculty seminar, it did not involve students. It was terrific. It was my intellectual life for a long time. And I learned from people in history, engineering, doctors, all coming, presenting papers, and we'd say, now look, you're using copia there. And is that the right figure to use? No, maybe you should be using an aphora or something. It was, and it can be done anywhere. Try
Well,
it.
we hope in the Miller Upton Forum that we're helping contribute to that.
You are. There's no question about it that this kind of forum does exactly that. When you have panelists like this, these people are not, we're not trained the same way. We come from very different, mostly from very different disciplines.
Question from Virgil?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll defer, I get to speak tomorrow.
Yeah.
So this question is for Laura and everybody, Laura et al. Acknowledging that like Max, you and I are not remotely friends. Like we don't know each other. Like I've just sort of learned about Max you really recently because
He's a sociopath.
well, it's easy to avoid him in the realm of Shakespeare where I live and hang out. But
Iago is a good case.
one of the things that I'm wondering is that when I'm thinking about sort of Max, you and your apples and bananas, XY, it seems to me that thinking about either ethics or culture as a way of sort of explaining or balancing how that works, I'm wondering about what happens if we think about ethics and culture as a commodity thinking about like if max U is about how many apples one can have, while also thinking of oneself as an ethical being. Like thinking about the way in which it seems to me that sort of the conceptualization of like
Yeah.
us as good folk, like that like thinking about that might be something that like enters the way that Max U conducts his business. It's not obviously not fully formed at all in terms of thinking about this, but I'm wondering about ways in which these things like ethics and culture, and I'm also thinking about what Catherine's saying about accessibility in bodies and who is allowed to count as part of these things, like ways, I guess what I'm saying is, might we think about these things as commodities? Question mark.
So I don't think it's necessarily helpful to, so in one of my, using the max U, if my utility is a function of my belief system, I don't think that really gets us anywhere.
Right.
I don't think so.
So I don't think making things commodities is what improves any sort of understanding or explanation. So Deirdre says that we should throw out max U. I don't think that we can try to put ethics into that apples and bananas graph in any way that would do justice to the
That's right.
notion.
There's an economist named George Akerlof, and the Nobel Prize winner, the husband of the current sort of reserve chairperson. And George tries to do exactly that. Tries to make identity a maximizing question. And to get back to gender, in case it slipped your mind, deciding to change gender is not a maximization problem. Believe me, it's not a good career move. And in any case, it's not, and because I'm an economist, a month before I did change gender, a month before it hit me that I could and would, in August of 1995, I'm an economist. So I drew up, I'm not making this up, I drew up a cost-benefit study of changing gender. Now this is pazzo, loco, this is insane. Because of course we don't do identity that way. In fact, I said to Iago is a good example, but he's not. Because it's motiveless, as famous phrase, motiveless malignity. He just does his stuff. He doesn't really gain anything from it. That's true, actually. A lot of Shakespeare characters have, failures to maximize. They just are who they are, right?
At least on the page. I mean, I think one can argue what's the embodied. I mean, Iago. I've read a motiveless Iago. I've never seen a motiveless Iago.
Yeah, I know
because once
what you
Iago is embodied, then
That's quite an interesting point. That's right. But I think it's because you assume
right.
when you see a human being and they do something,
And I see them in
you
space.
assume there's some motive for it. People are always asking me, this is kind of naive, people say, why did you change gender? And I'm kind of expecting the answer you give when you say, why did you buy a Mercedes? It's actually a lot cheaper than buying a Mercedes. But, you didn't say, well, horsepower. That's not how you make the kinds of decisions that most of you students are, not decisions exactly, but life choices and so on, that you're making right now about who you are. Everyone in this room, and even us old folks, but the young people, are thinking about who they are, trying to work out who they are. What's their path to life? And it's not just, your parents are going to say, for God's sakes, maximize utility, choose accounting. But it's not about a calculation, is it? I mean, Silas, for example, doesn't, maximize the discounted value of his income by doing what he did.
I think we can entertain one more question.
Okay. So I was really interested in this, in Catherine, from your presentation. I thought it was really fascinating, and the way you sort of began it with a kind of tragedy. The field is, in fact, hypersensitive to the pitfalls of labeling, identifying, counting, and categorizing. Bodies fell into the trap of labeling and categorizing.
But it's very productive. It's very productive,
And
yeah.
right. And so, and as you were saying that, I sort of, and you sort of ended your talk talking about the kind of frustration that other disciplines would have when you sort of come into them and you say, look, you got to be sensitive to these kinds of pitfalls. It made me think of the quote from Law that it's, for the master's tools will never be used to dismantle the master's house.
I love that because I was almost going to do it, and I thought, oh, that's kind of overused, and so I'm glad you brought it up anyway.
I wonder if it's not I guess put a question in I wonder if it's not a kind of magical thinking to think that we can ever really escape these kinds of things, and that we shouldn't maybe.
Yeah, and that's why I implicate. So this dream of social justice, right, in identity-based disciplines, is a dream that is, it's hard to pry it from the hands of folks who are in my field, right? There is a search for an answer. And I guess the thing that I'm thinking about here is that when the solution and the problem come from the same historical milieu, right? I mean, that becomes a very complicated question, right? So, I mean, that's the piece that's kind of interesting to me. I am skeptical of saviors and try even to think about my own discipline as a kind of savior, right? I'm not looking for conversions when I teach classes, right? I'm looking for critical thinking about the paradoxes, right? I mean, that's the thing that's interesting. So I always write about paradoxes. This is what I think.
I am trying to convert people. Quite. But I want to convert them from an unthinking hostility to the commercial world.
I guess I'm thinking about labels. Like,
Yeah,
people
that's
are
right,
thinking
exactly.
like, oh, I'm a
So-
feminist. It's like, that's not the point, right?
Exactly, there I completely agree with you. I want them to respect what most people do. Most people earn their living by making goods and services that other people are prepared to pay for, prepared to sacrifice their hard work for these goods and services provided by companies and people. And I want we intellectuals, we college professors especially, to stop sneering at that. That's ridiculous, because it's what we do. It's what everyone does. We earn our living by providing what we hope is a good product called a Deloitte BA or a UIC BA that people are prepared to pay for. So I want to at least convert them away from, well, one of my favorite quotes, and we can end this way, is from Samuel Johnson. Dr. Johnson was called, 18th century poet and critic, who said, you have to know the word can't. Can't in English, it's an obscure word, it means unthinking or orthodoxy. What everyone says. Everyone says the biggest problem facing humankind is global warming. That's baloney. The biggest problem facing humankind is poverty. That's the real problem. But okay, he said, clear your mind of can't. I think as college teachers, that's what we're trying to do. Clear your mind of can't, not can't. But can't. Thank you.
What a wonderful note to conclude.